The Israelites stood at the edge of the Jordan River. They had wandered in the desert for 40 years. Now the promised land lay before them, but the Jordan was overflowing its banks. The river raged, a swirling, muddy torrent. How could they possibly cross? Their leader Joshua had received instructions from God. He told the people to prepare themselves. They were to consecrate themselves to the Lord. They needed to be ready for a miracle. The promised land was so close, yet the river seemed an insurmountable barrier. They stood at the precipice of a new chapter, a new beginning. All eyes were fixed on the swirling waters of the Jordan, a barrier between their past and their future. Joshua commanded the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant to step into the river. The Ark was a sacred chest. It represented God's presence among his people. The priests stepped forward, their hearts pounding. The moment their feet touched the water's edge, something miraculous happened. The water upstream began to pile up. A path, dry and firm, appeared before them. The priests continued to walk forward, the ark held high. A pathway through the raging river was now clear. He was now leading them into the promised land. The water upstream stood like a solid wall shimmering in the sunlight. It was a breathtaking sight. The riverbed below was dry and dusty. The Israelites could see the stones and pebbles on the river floor. It was as if the river had vanished completely. The priests carrying the ark stood in the middle of the dry riverbed. They waited for all the people to cross. The Israelites began to cross one by one. Families walked hand in hand. Children skipped and played on the dry ground. The elderly moved slowly but steadily, their faces radiant with joy. The crossing took hours. Thousands of people, along with their livestock and belongings, passed through the parted waters. It was a momentous occasion. It was a defining moment in their history. They were leaving behind the wilderness and entering the land God had promised them. As the last person crossed, the priest with the ark stepped onto the other side. The moment their feet touched the bank, the waters rushed back in. The wall upstream collapsed. The river returned to its normal course, swirling and raging as before. The Israelites stood on the other side, safe and dry, marveling at the miracle they had witnessed. The Israelites had now crossed the Jordan River. They stood on the soil of the promised land. It was a land flowing with milk and honey, a land of abundance and opportunity. But it was also a land of challenges and unknowns. They would face new enemies, new obstacles, and new temptations. They would need to rely on God's guidance and strength more than ever before. Their journey was far from over. Crossing the Jordan was just the beginning. They looked back at the river, now flowing freely again. It represented the trials and hardships they had left behind. It also represented God's faithfulness and power. He had brought them safely through. He had kept his promise. They looked ahead to the promised land, a land of hills and valleys, forests and fields. It was a land full of promise and potential, but it was also a land that required courage, faith, and perseverance. They took a deep breath, ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that God was with them. A new beginning. Crossing the Jordan signified a new beginning for the Israelites. They were leaving behind a life of wandering and uncertainty. They were entering a new chapter of their history, a chapter of settlement and prosperity. The promised land represented a fresh start, a chance to build a new life. It was a place where they could establish their homes, raise their families, and worship their God freely. It was a land of hope and opportunity. They were no longer slaves wandering in the desert. They were free people entering the land God had promised to their ancestors. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It was a fulfillment of God's ancient covenant. It was a testament to his enduring love and faithfulness. They knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges and struggles, but they also knew that God was with them. He had brought them this far, and he would continue to guide and protect them. They were filled with a sense of gratitude, hope, and anticipation for the future. Lessons in faith. The story of crossing the Jordan holds powerful lessons about faith. It teaches us that true faith requires action. The Israelites didn't just stand on the riverbank and wish for a miracle. They stepped into the water, trusting that God would provide a way. Faith is not passive belief, it's active trust. It's a willingness to step out in obedience even when we don't fully understand what God is doing. It's about taking that first step even when the path ahead seems uncertain. The Israelites demonstrated their faith by following Joshua's instructions. They consecrated themselves to the Lord. They prepared their hearts and minds to receive God's miracle. They actively participated in the process, even though they couldn't see how it would all work out. Their faith was rewarded. God parted the waters, providing a safe passage for his people. This story reminds us that God honors those who trust in him. He empowers us to overcome obstacles that seem impossible. He leads us to victory when we choose to walk in faith. Trusting the unseen. The Israelites couldn't see how God would part the waters. They had to trust in his promises, even when the situation seemed hopeless. They had to believe in the unseen, in the power of God that transcends human understanding. Trusting the unseen is a fundamental aspect of faith. It's about believing that God is working even when we can't see the evidence. It's about having confidence in his plan, even when it doesn't make sense to us. The Israelites had to overcome their fears and doubts. They had to choose to believe in God's power over their own limitations. They had to step out in faith, knowing that God would catch them if they fell. Their trust in the unseen was rewarded. God provided a way where there seemed to be no way. He demonstrated his power and faithfulness in a dramatic and undeniable way. This story encourages us to trust in God, even when we don't understand his ways. Overcoming obstacles. The Jordan River represented a significant obstacle for the Israelites. It seemed impossible to cross, but with God's help, they overcame it. This story teaches us that with faith, we can overcome any obstacle in our lives. We all face challenges and difficulties. We may encounter obstacles that seem insurmountable, but the story of crossing the Jordan reminds us that nothing is impossible with God. He can provide a way when there seems to be no way. The Israelites didn't cross the Jordan alone. They crossed together as a community. They supported each other, encouraged each other, and helped each other along the way. This reminds us of the importance of community and support in overcoming obstacles. We don't have to face our challenges alone. We can rely on God's strength, and we can also seek support from our friends, family, and faith community. Together, we can overcome any obstacle that stands in our way. Crossing our own Jordans. The story of crossing the Jordan is not just an ancient tale. It's a timeless message of hope and inspiration. We all face our own Jordans in life. We all have challenges and obstacles that seem impossible to overcome. Please like and subscribe to help us grow our spiritual channel. Thanks.